I started feeling really, really sick on a pretty regular basis, that I began researching alternative healing methods and just became more interested in using food as a means for health and healing and prevention.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Julia Deppe to the podcast, and we're digging into how to cook a fertility diet like a chef. So Julia created the recipes for the Fab Fertile Cookbook and the fertility preparation program, which is the elimination diet. And I'm just going to share with you her bio. So upon being prescribed a new diet sans gluten, dairy, and a slew of other foods, Julia hesitantly embraced the change and began experimenting in her Brooklyn apartment. She soon realized it wasn't impossible to enjoy eating within the given restraints and decided to focus on providing others struggling to navigate their own health hurdles with satisfying, feel-good food. A shift from the photo world and subsequent training and certification from the Natural Gourmet Institute in 2012 led Julia to a variety of New York City's plant-based, gluten-free, and dairy-free kitchens. She developed the opening cafe menu and managed the kitchen of Philadelphia's first organic, plant-based, gluten-free, and dairy-free eatery. And now Julia resides in Oakland, where she creates healthful, personalized, allergy-friendly meals. She volunteers with Cooking Matters food education programs and is a chef for First Descent adventure programs, cooking plant-based meals for young adults impacted by cancer. Check out her website at Julia Deppe, so Julia, JuliaDeppe.com. Before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, wherever you're listening to this, to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited to chat with you here. And yeah, maybe if you could just start with your journey and how you came to do this really cool job as a health-inspired chef.
Sure. So I've worked around food for, I would say, almost my whole life. I waitressed at the age of 13 and every weekend throughout high school, and I catered all throughout college. During my senior year is when I actually wrote a paper about corporate sponsorships in public schools. And that's when I kind of really started thinking about all of the moving parts in the food system. And I definitely didn't make the most healthy food choices growing up, but it wasn't until I started feeling really, really sick on a pretty regular basis that I began researching alternative healing methods and just became more interested in using food as a means for health and healing and prevention. So several years later, I was prescribed a restricted diet. And as someone that grew up eating a ton of bread and cheese, all the things, all delicious things, but were not sitting well with me, I knew I needed to make really big changes in my food intake. So I did a lot more cooking at home, and I realized that it wasn't so difficult to actually create delicious and nutritious foods. And I really wanted to be able to help others do the same thing. So pretty soon after, I left the photography industry where I was working for a few years prior, and I enrolled at the Natural Gourmet Institute, which is a health supportive culinary program that's located in Manhattan. And from there, I've worked in pretty much only health-focused commercial and private kitchens all over the country. So ultimately, I hope to be able to help as many people as possible eat to nourish their individual needs, and also just empower them to take their health into their own hands.
Yeah, I've been to the Natural Gourmet there, and I went to one of their Friday night dinners a couple of years, 2-3 years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Those are the final projects.
Is the exam? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And can you share kind of your health story a little bit? I'm not sure if that's something you typically share, or is it just more you just were not feeling well and you had to kind of restrict what it was you're eating?
I started feeling really ill toward the end of college, and it was a combination of just joint pain and headaches and stomach aches and kind of all different things. And I saw so many different doctors over the years. I mean, even over the last 10 plus years. and nobody could pinpoint what was going on. And honestly, it wasn't until very recently that I had someone diagnose me. But several years back, maybe 5 or so years ago, is when one of the naturopaths that I visited told me to eliminate gluten and dairy. So that was my first step kind of out of the standard American diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a few years ago when that initially took place. And now, I mean, I've also been diagnosed with SIBO and other things, thyroid and a bunch of different things. So the diet has kind of shifted over the years and gotten more restricted with different protocol. But that's kind of where it began.
Mm-hmm. So really kind of cutting out those inflammatory foods and then starting with if your digestive issues and joint pain, and really, because a lot of people that are coming to us with infertility, they struggle with infertility, but there's other health issues going on. So such as, mood, joint, digestive issues, autoimmune, joint. And so those are all clues. And, people that are listening to this podcast, it impacts their fertility. Other people, it could impact other things.
Right. And they all kind of play into each other.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's go into, what did you have for dinner last night?
Well, so you're based in Canada. I'm actually based in the States. So last night was the 4th of July.
Oh, right, 4th of July.
So yeah. So I was actually, I was out east, excuse me, on the eastern end of Long Island visiting my family. And we were at the beach most of the day, and then decided to keep it pretty simple with the standard July 4th barbecue, except for I really wanted to utilize the local farms. So I had never cooked duck before. It's just not something I've really experimented with, but we ended up cooking duck and a bunch of local produce, and we had herbs from my dad's garden and, local corn and green beans with, caramelized fennel and almond. And I made a cherry sauce I had a bone broth that I had made earlier in the week to sip on, to snack on throughout the week. So I made a cherry sauce with that. And we had crispy potatoes and grilled zucchini and lettuces from the farm. So it was just a lot of, local veggie and the duck, and then some other barbecue, chicken and other things too, for those that didn't want that.
That's awesome.
And then of course I couldn't have the ice cream that everyone was eating for dessert. So I actually brought over, silly enough, I flew from California, and I actually, I packed a bunch of food with me that I thought might be a pain to find. So I brought a gum-free coconut cream with me.
Yeah. And
so I had that with my fresh berries for dessert.
And so how do you whip the coconut cream? Because it comes in, it's in that little, because it's in that, it's off the shelf, right? In that little container. Then you just sort of what do you add to it?
Yeah, so you can add vanilla powder or vanilla extract. If you can eat sweetener, you can add some sort of sweetener, whether it be maple syrup or stevia or honey. And that's really it, like a little pinch of sea salt, and it does the trick. I actually ate it plain, but I've been eating very simply because of my current diet. So, but yeah, it's really nice with a little bit of maple syrup and vanilla.
And you just blend it, right? Are you blending it, or you can't? Because it's kind of hard, I think, if I'm getting it right. Yeah.
It depends on the brand. So some of the brands have gums in them, and those actually, unfortunately, are the ones that typically, I would say, make almost a nicer cream. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people react to the gums. Mm-hmm. So so I put the container in the freezer for a little while, and then in the fridge, and I just kind of scooped out the part that was a little bit more creamy versus the milky bit. And then you can save the milk portion for smoothies or, for other recipes.
Nice.
But you can just quickly whip it.
Yeah, because I do where you do the can of coconut milk, and then you put it in the refrigerator for 24 hours, and then you turn it upside down, take the top off, and then reserve the liquid for a smoothie. And then you can then beat that and kind of have your own coconut cream. This is that what you're talking about, or is it more the...
it is. It's basically the same. It's just, I used a cream. It's actually sold as a coconut cream, but it comes, because it doesn't have the gum in it, it actually has a similar effect as the milk. So it still tends to separate a bit. Okay. The gum is what kind of, keeps it all together. So it's basically the same process with this particular cream.
But that dinner sounded awesome. So like green beans, a cherry sauce, potatoes, lettuce, and then the bone broth that you'd reserved. Yeah, that sounds, and the herbs. I know I love, so what herbs did you put with that then?
Gosh, he has, I think we used, what did I put? I stuffed the duck with thyme and actually fennel and parsley, I believe. And then, yeah, different herbs in the potatoes as well. I think it was close to the same kind of combination that was kind of sprinkled about throughout the whole meal.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you do the potatoes? You just put them in, what's it called?
The potatoes, they were first simmered until they were cooked through. So I left the skins on. And so they got nice and soft, but not too soft that the skins would start to peel off. And then I actually pan-seared them in duck fat since I had it. I figured I might as well go all out.
4th of July.
Yeah. So they were, I mean, I also can't eat potatoes, but everyone seemed to be pleased with that. So.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, that sounds like a pretty good 4th of July meal. I love it. So I guess when people kind of like when they come to see us, we have them in our couples coaching program. We have them start off with a food sensitivity test, and then while they're waiting for the results of the food sensitivity test, then we have them do an elimination diet, which is sort of the gold standard to figure out what you're intolerant to, or you take out dairy, gluten, corn, soy, peanuts, eggs. So you take those out and then systematically reintroduce them. People, when we tell them, it can be like, oh my goodness, what am I going to eat? I'm going to eat like just nothing. I'm going to sit over there and starve. So you've actually helped, like you created all the recipes for the fertility preparation program, which is essentially the elimination diet. And the recipes are like awesome and delicious, and there's no starvation going on. Yeah. How do we make, eating healthy? I mean, it's probably like a societal thing where we think eating healthy is like, oh my God, deprivation. Like, what's your take on it?
I think healthy doesn't have to mean plain, and healthy food gets such a bad rap. It's more about knowing how to enhance the flavors of the food. So I would say number one tip is just start with the best possible ingredients. So if you're shopping for fresh produce, they're peak quality, which means they're also going to have peak flavor. So if you do happen to have a farmer's market that's close by, then you'll have seasonal produce, and then the produce will taste so much more vibrant because it's not sitting in, a truck or whatever, flying across the country or flying across the world to get to the grocery store. So, I mean, that's my number one tip if that's available to you. But then I would also say sometimes, the freezer or frozen food isn't an enemy. Sometimes it's even best to buy frozen produce because it is actually stored in its peak. So if you're purchasing strawberries at the grocery store in the middle of the winter, they're most likely not going to be very sweet. They might be very white, kind of gritty. But if you purchase frozen strawberries, they were frozen right off, as soon as they were trimmed. So they'll have so much more flavor. So it's not a bad thing to purchase frozen food. And then I would say, secondly, ingredient preparation is just super important. So we said buy in season and frozen if not fresh, if fresh isn't available. And then season with aromatics. You can use onion, garlic, and citrus, different vinegars, fresh herbs, fresh, spices. I love to add texture to meals. So maybe different nuts and seeds or varying cook techniques. Maybe combining some raw food with some cooked food so that there are different textures in your mouth. You can use flavorful broths or oils. Roasting vegetables is always a great way to bring out a lot of the flavor because they get kind of a caramelized taste and then with that crunch. And also I would say just don't be afraid to experiment. You can mix different vegetables together for varying flavors and textures. Or instead of, I think a lot of people maybe think when they think healthy food, they think plain steamed chicken and plain steamed vegetables, right?
And a salad.
But exactly. We can marinate proteins and that adds so much flavor. So adding acids will tenderize the meat, and then that can be, citrus or yogurt or vinegar, and then all different herbs can be added or different spices, and that really just brings out the flavor. Also salt. A lot of people are scared of salt, but if you use a nice quality sea salt, I think it should be your friend.
Exactly.
So regular table salt has anti-caking agents in it and it's kind of lacking minerals, but sea salt has a lot of minerals and it's actually good for your system. And the sea salt actually, you don't want to overdo it with salt because then the food will just taste salty and it won't kind of just masks the flavor of the food. But if you add the right amount of salt, then it really just acts as a flavor enhancer. So I say don't be scared of salt. Also poaching, you could poach in flavorful liquids. So like we mentioned coconut milk earlier, you could use that leftover coconut milk to poach fish with maybe lemongrass or ginger or a combination of, different other aromatics. Topping meals with citrus is always helpful. And I mentioned before different crunch, so maybe different seed combinations, or I like to make a savory, kind of like a savory granola topping that I will throw on top of dishes. And then as far as grains go, they can be toasted or in the pan prior to cooking, and then that brings out the nuttiness. So that also just is another way to enhance flavor. So then I think, like, as a whole, just think about your palate and how we enjoy combinations of salty, sweet, sour, spicy, umami. And if you kind of hit all of those different flavors in a meal, then you tend to be more satisfied. So it makes a dish more exciting, in my opinion, if it has a little bit of all of those flavors.
Yeah. The poaching idea is a good thing. So do you have a quick one for that? So you said some coconut milk. So you poach fish with lemongrass and ginger, and so how would you go about doing that one?
Yeah, you could use cilantro stems even with lemongrass and ginger and a little bit of salt and pepper, and you just lightly. So it's basically a bath for the fish or chicken or whatever animal protein you want to use. And depending on the type of fish and type of meat, it'll take varying amounts of time to cook. But you just keep it at a low simmer. And you can even a lot of people aren't eating soy as well, depending on what kind of restrictions they have. But same with tofu, you could poach tofu as well. And it'll soak in some of the flavor. So it's a nice light way of cooking animal protein. And it will absorb whatever flavors are in the liquid.
Yeah, and a fish is probably I guess a white fish would probably only be 5 to 10 minutes. Like, it's not a long.
Yeah, it's very quick.
I would say chicken would be a little longer, but yeah.
Yeah. And then I would say the last thing, I just believe that food tastes better when it looks good.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. It doesn't have to be, masterfully plated, but if you just put intention into the food that you cook, then I think it tastes better.
Yeah, it does. And I know when I was testing all the recipes for the fertility prep program, and just because you had all these different colors, how you designed it, every time I would take my little iPhone picture there, I'm like, oh, that actually, it looks good, because I don't need to add anything to it. It looked colorful and nice, and yeah, you want to eat it.
Right. I very much believe in eating the rainbow. Yeah. For every meal as much as possible. It looks nice, and then I think it tastes better.
And what's that granola that you put on things?
I actually have been making it's sort of like a shiitake bacon. So if you slice shiitake mushrooms very thinly and just coat them in a very little bit of oil with a little bit of sea salt, and you can use pepper or cayenne if you like spicy, and then roast them down until they're crisp. And then I toss that with different seeds. So I might use hemp seeds and sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, sometimes even lentil if a little extra protein is needed, but just to use as a savory topping. And then that's nice on top of soups, or just thrown on top of rice, even if you're eating, or just some sort of grain bowl, or into salad instead of a crouton.
Oh, that's good. So that's shiitakes, and then the oil, and then the sea salt. Yeah, I love it. And then you talked about a marinade. Is there anything that comes up there for you?
Typically just a mix. It depends on what types of flavors the rest of the dish is going to be, but I tend to do simple citrus, so lemon or lime, with maybe coriander, which is cilantro, maybe cumin and garlic, some oil, salt, pepper. That's a really basic, and then that'll infuse quite a bit of flavor into the meat.
So you're just tossing that in a little bowl and then putting it in there in the fridge for half an hour, or how are you?
I like to marinate it as long as possible. So, if possible, to do it for, longer than that, but just the longer that it sits, the more flavor will be found in the final product. But just, make sure to refrigerate it while it's soaking. And that can be done, in a glass dish, or even, if you're making a fair amount, you could make it simpler and put it even into a Ziploc bag, and then it's easy to kind of toss around and just evenly coat everything.
And then as far as another thing that people say when they're like, oh, I got to switch over to this diet, is kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be chopping and prepping all the time. What's your take on that? Any tips to save time?
I mean, it definitely is time consuming to cook. It can be. So I think planning ahead is essential. If you sit down and kind of determine a list of meals that you're interested in eating throughout the week, or different flavors, or different, even if it's just, I want to make sure to eat this particular vegetable during a week's time. If you have a list, it'll save you time, one, in the grocery store, and then it'll save you time, two, when you get home in the kitchen. So if you just put that little bit of extra time in the front end, then it kind of makes everything else a little bit faster. And honestly, with dietary restrictions, I find it to be completely impossible to not plan ahead. Mm-hmm. If you want to stick with it, it can be, of course, really challenging to find things out. And so it just, I think, it takes a lot of the stress out of eating if you are well prepared. So I think setting aside time to meal prep is extremely valuable. One thing I would say is to always make extra food. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I see the freezer as being my friend at this point with a restricted diet. I always have my freezer packed with food. So I'll make extra portions. And that way it allows for more variety throughout the week as well, because I can pull from the freezer and then supplement. So I might, make sure to have a constant stock of prepared soups and stews and curries and different things in the freezer that I can then use as a base for other meals. And so I can combine, maybe I combine a carrot soup that's in the fridge with, even if it's just, if I happen to steam some chicken that week and I have a bunch of herbs in the fridge, then I can toss them all together with maybe that seed crumble to throw on top or something along those lines. And so it kind of pulling pieces from the freezer and the fridge with prepped vegetables in the refrigerator, frozen items in the freezer, and then everything comes together a little bit more easily. Even if you don't have time to, prep for 2 full hours on the weekend, you can take an hour to, maybe cut onions and garlic and a variety of different vegetables and maybe prep your greens. And then you can throw together a salad or a quick stir fry or something throughout the week. So actually one thing I do with clients, certain clients that prefer to have a little bit more variety but just don't have the time to cook, is I'll prepare them one soup, several portions of each, but one soup, a few different animal proteins, a few different vegetables, some form of salad greens, then some kind of savory topping. And then they can take the pieces and put them together how they like. So if they're craving soup, they can use the soup as a base and throw in some of that, one of the animal proteins, and throw in some of the vegetables, and then maybe do a salad the next day with similar ingredients, but they can still swap it out. So I find if you always have a mixed variety of greens prepped in the fridge, a few different fresh herbs that can be thrown into things to give it a little bit of variation and flavor. Maybe if eggs are okay for you, maybe some hard-boiled eggs, sliced veggies, I think I probably said, and cooked animal protein. And then you can really just mix and match.
Sorry, you always had those, that the soup, the stew, or the curries, kind of those little bases that are in there. So you'd cook it, eat part of it, and then save the rest. Then you can add in different animal proteins and things as you go along.
Exactly. There's always additional food in the freezer that can be used to kind of bring in, to add more variety into whatever preparation you already put into for that specific week. And then you can also use ice trays to, freeze single portions of pestos and different sauces.
Oh, that's cool.
Maybe make tomato sauce that's just a plain tomato sauce. And then you might take it out of the freezer and decide, I want something a little more interesting, and add a bunch of spices to it to make it more of a curried tomato sauce. And then maybe add some meatballs that you happen to prepare that week to it, and then throw in some greens, and then you have a full meal.
What's a favorite pesto you have that's vegan?
If miso is doable, I like to use a miso paste instead of Parmesan. Mm-hmm. And then I was making at one point a fair amount of pistachio kale pesto.
Oh yeah.
But, I use whatever I happen to have on hand, honestly. So you can use walnuts, pumpkin seeds, anything, any herbs, any greens, and then some lemon juice, some oil, some sea salt, pepper.
Yeah. I, the other day made one. It was basil and pumpkin seeds, and then garlic and olive oil. But yeah, I could have had the lemon in there. But yeah, I always think of pesto that it has to be basil. So it's any herb.
Parsley, cilantro, anything.
Yeah, and that's like super easy to put. And what would you use a pesto on? Like I think of pesto with pasta. Like you probably think it with all sorts of different things.
Yeah, I mean, you can put it on any animal proteins. Goes nicely on fish, on chicken, on any kind of meat, really. On vegetables, even. You could toss it with vegetables or even use it as a salad dressing.
Oh yeah.
Toss it into mixed greens or into a soup as just, to add a little pop of flavor to if you were eating the same soup throughout a week and you want something more.
Yeah, I remember when I was testing your recipes, I think there's a squash soup in there where you put pumpkin seeds on top of it and they just sit on top. And I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. I do that a lot now. I'm like, oh, I just love having that little extra crunch on top.
Crunch.
It feels kind of special that you're almost at like a little restaurant that you've, prepared this beautiful, like squash soup is super easy to make. And then adding a little something on top or garnish just makes it feel extra special.
Yeah, I just find meals to be a lot more satisfying when they have a little bit of variation in texture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that allows for it. And it doesn't need to be anything that's well thought out or prepared. You can just throw some nuts and seeds on top and then, it just gives you that little extra something to chew on.
And so what's your favorite ingredient to work with?
Oh gosh. I'm so not a favorites person. Let's see. One ingredient that I love to use is young Thai coconut meat, but that's more, I would say more for desserts. I just find it to be so creamy and delicious if you have a high-speed blender.
Mm-hmm.
But I use a ton of cilantro. It's something that I hated as a kid, and I know it's very polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think it tastes like soap.
Yep.
And I oddly did think it tasted like soap for years and years until only a few years ago, and now I throw it in everything.
I love it personally.
But yeah, I love cilantro. I love cumin as well.
Mm-hmm.
I put cumin seed and ground cumin in a lot of my food. And I would say, again, don't be afraid to experiment in the kitchen. One of my favorite summer drinks is a bit of a twist on lemonade. And I just squeeze a little bit of lemon juice into ice water and with a little pinch of cumin and a little pinch of turmeric.
Yeah.
And it's not you could add honey or some stevia or some kind of sweetener if you prefer, but I'm not a sweets person. And I find it to be so refreshing and satisfying.
So just a juice of one lemon without like over ice water, or how would that, what's the ratio there?
I think I usually do about a half a lemon for a large glass of water. So it's just a simple, I just love lemon water. So it's not super strong and it's not too tart, but it just has a subtle tartness and then a subtle spice.
Yeah, the cumin and turmeric. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so with the young coconut meat, I know I had issues trying to open that thing. I saw someone on the Shark Tank actually where they developed a special opener to.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what are you making with that then?
I love to make yogurts. And even if they don't actually have any probiotic, but you could use a probiotic, but just pureeing the meat down with water and vanilla. If sweetener is a possibility, you can add a little bit of maple syrup or stevia or something along those lines. And similarly to the coconut cream we were talking about earlier, but with the fresh coconut meat, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then if you were to add a little bit of lemon juice, then it has more of a yogurt flavor. So just a good non-dairy yogurt substitute minus the probiotic. But again, then you can also make a probiotic coconut yogurt as well. And then also just blending in fruits. It's delicious if you throw a mango in or, whatever fruit you like, just similar to a fruity yogurt. And then you can top it with granola or other fruit or, shredded toasted coconut or different nuts or whatever toppings you enjoy.
Yeah. And do you have any tips for opening that little lovely young coconut thing that seems a little scary? Oh my goodness.
I don't know that I have any real you need to have a very solid knife. Yeah. A strong knife. I just kind of hack into it. I spin it in a circle and just do a pretty strong slice until it opens. I don't have any real tricks.
Okay. And then I think I've only done it once. And then, for the probiotic coconut milk, then you can just, I guess, get a capsule of probiotic and put it in. I'd had it where it sits on the counter for a day or so, a couple of days. And then I guess sometimes they say to keep it warm. But
exactly.
It's 90 degrees right now where we're recording this. But so you would then just take a little capsule and for a couple of days, is that what you normally do? Or how do you make the probiotic coconut?
I actually haven't done it with the probiotics before. No, I make my own because I currently can't eat that, but currently I have to eat dairy yogurt, but not, 24 hours for SIBO. So yeah, but I just love the coconut cream as is without it doesn't have the same benefits. But if that does work for you, then it is something you can, I believe it is similar where you would probably mix the probiotic capsule with some of the coconut cream and then mix it all together and let it sit, I would imagine, for about 24 hours until it begins to ferment, essentially. And
Yeah, I've got some recipe where they said put it on a heating pad and have the heat pad on really low for 24 hours, and then it's just sort of curdling away there. And then
right. So sometimes they say the pilot light in the oven is sufficient, or you can put it in the dehydrator on a low heat, or if it's hot outside, just like with making sauerkraut and things of that nature. If it's warm out, you often can just leave it on the countertop.
And so so we talked about the farmer's market. Do you have any tips to find the best produce at the farmer's market or how to navigate your way around there?
I would say the best route to take at the farmer's market is really just to not be afraid to talk to the farmer. They want to connect with the community, and they often have unique suggestions for how to cook with their funky produce that you maybe have never seen before because they grow it, so they know it best. So I think really just not being afraid to talk to them is the best way to go, and look for, you can look for organic where possible, but oftentimes the small farms can't afford the hefty fees that the farms have to pay in order to get certified as organic. So oftentimes they will use all organic practices, but they can't call themselves organic because there are regulations. So it's really great to just have a dialogue with the farmer, and then they'll let you know what kinds of they're using pesticides and how they're growing their food or how they're raising their meat. And then you can make an informed decision, because a lot of, like I said, the certification, it only means so much because really it's driven by the funds that go into certifying. So, and then also just as far as saving money, oftentimes the prices will decrease toward the end of the day once they've been out for some time and they're trying to get rid of the produce before heading back. So if you're trying to save money on good quality produce, if you go a little bit later in the day before closing, then oftentimes they will have deals. And then with meats, I would say ask for pastured, grass-fed, and finished, because oftentimes the animals are pastured until the very end, and then they're fed grain, and sometimes even fed grain in a feedlot, so that they gain weight right before the slaughter. So it's nice to know to ask the farmer whether or not they were grass finished as well.
Grass finished. Okay, I didn't know that term. Okay, those are some great tips. Where are you in California?
I live in Oakland, California, in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. So just across from San Francisco.
Nice. Yeah, we were in California last year. We went to San Francisco, and there was the Fisherman's Wharf down there? Yeah, Fisherman's Wharf. And then they had some really, I found this gluten-free bakery there, and they had an avocado toast with gluten-free toast with avocado, and I was like in heaven.
Right. Yeah. They're located right in the Ferry building.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. We were there a bunch of times. Okay. So, and as far as some spices, what are some good flavor combinations?
So, one thing you could do really is Google, to be honest. It doesn't hurt, but it's often nice to mix citrus with a couple of different spices and then a couple of fresh herbs maybe. So if you want more, let's say, kind of like Mexican inspired flavors, maybe you go with fresh coriander and cumin and maybe ground coriander and oregano and lime. There are so many different flavor combinations. It's hard for me to eat.
Yeah, I just know because when I did all that testing it took me like months to do all that testing for all those recipes. And before that, I used to always have to cook with a recipe, and I didn't understand how that it would be like cumin, chili powder, garlic, or like kind of knew the garlic side of it. That there were certain ones that just went together. So now I can kind of, actually, I rarely cook with a recipe anymore and kind of just make my own stuff with these spices. So yeah,
I would say, part of the beauty of cooking is that you really can, there's so much freedom to experiment in so many different ways. And I know that seems overwhelming for people that don't necessarily like to cook, but recipes are developed because people try new things. So really it's up to your palate and what you enjoy. So I think just experimenting is a great way to determine, because it doesn't at the end of the day, what matters is that you enjoy the flavor combination. Mm-hmm. So I would say it definitely comes more naturally with practice, and you start to learn what types of flavors are missing by tasting, the final product. So you might take a bite of something and think, okay, well, it needs a little bit more salt, and not necessarily to taste salty, but it'll just enhance the flavor, or maybe it needs a little more acid, which also does it similarly brings out flavors of the food naturally. And I think that cooking definitely becomes easier and less stressful if you turn it into a habit. So like I said, the more you do it, the more you might have tried cumin and coriander and garlic and onion and in one dish, and then you say, okay, I really like the way that goes, and then you might add some spice the next time, some cayenne or something to add a little bit more. So I think an easy way to kind of start to learn how to cook without a recipe and just combining different flavors is to look at simple recipes, and you can kind of break down the parts. And so, for example, if you're making a grain salad, it could have a number of different grains used. Just because there's rice in the recipe doesn't mean you have to use rice for your salad. You could put quinoa in it. You could put barley, farro, whatever grain that you enjoy eating. And then the same goes for all the herbs and spices. So if it calls for cilantro, you could add parsley instead, or you could add thyme, or, and then you can start to kind of just swap things out. So if it seems too scary to just throw a bunch of random things together, if you use a recipe just as a framework and a template versus the end all be all, then you can start to experiment with a little bit more structure and just see what you enjoy.
Yeah, that's a good tip, because it's really, it's sometimes good to have some different ideas, but then being able to substitute, because sometimes we think we have to follow it to the T. More, right. I guess, for more to the T when you're baking, or it might flop, but.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And if we were to kind of look at it, if we were to say like Italian flavors, Mexican, Moroccan, I don't know, I just randomly picked those. Like, are there ones that you think for Italian, what spices you use for that?
I mean, I often use garlic and oregano. Yeah, pretty simple. Onions. What was the other one that you mentioned?
Mexican.
Oh, Mexican. I usually use cumin, sometimes cumin seed directly in the oil initially, or other times just ground cumin. I use coriander, both the spice and also just the fresh herb. So often if I'm making stews and different things that I want to use coriander in, I'll often use the coriander stem and cook that in with the onion and garlic and just with the other seasoning at the beginning. But yeah, for Mexican, more oregano, coriander, cumin, different, spices. So different chilies and different, like a red cayenne to give a little bit more spice.
And what about Moroccan? I don't know why I picked that one, but
I don't actually cook a lot of Moroccan food.
What about, is it cardamom?
Cardamom's delicious.
Yeah, is that Moroccan?
It can be used in, a slew of different cuisines, but it's often used in India, and it's used in some Middle Eastern foods. It's used in a lot of different food preparation. But I find that to be, again, a little bit polarizing. I love it, but not necessarily for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. Yeah. It can be used in sweet and savory dishes.
Yeah. And then in the cookbook, we've got, you've made there's a few curries in there too that you've made. So, which are quite, and I think with a coconut milk base, and then potatoes or not even potatoes, I think sweet potatoes and zucchini and things like that, which was super easy, like 15-20 minutes to make. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can mix all different, you could mix cumin and ginger and salt, pepper, cinnamon, coriander. There's so many different flavor combinations. You can really just have a field day, just play around and just experiment.
As far as, do you have a go-to snack that's gluten or free or vegan, or even a paleo one too?
Yeah, like I said, I eat pretty simply, so I'll often make kale chips, which totally satisfy my salty, crunchy craving. Mm-hmm. I often eat nuts, sometimes fruit leather I'll make, just puree fruit down and then dehydrate it.
Yeah.
And so that's simple. I have a dehydrator. If you don't have a dehydrator, it's a little more time consuming. Well, not necessarily it's time consuming in the dehydrator as well, but you have to actually put it in the oven on a very low temperature. And it takes, I would say, around 4 or so hours with the oven on for a really thin layer of fruit. I also love just dried fruit. Again, that's not something I can really eat at the moment, but it's a great, simple snack. Different balls with dates and nuts and seeds, avocado, or just guacamole with all kinds of toppings and crunchies and things on top, dips made with different squash or different, maybe even bell pepper or cauliflower or something instead of, if beans aren't doable, you can always use other vegetables to make dips. I love different nut and seed crackers that are grain-free. Bone broth, I think, is a great snack. Satisfies, if you put a little bit of salt in it as well, satisfies the salty craving. And I'll often have bone broth just in my fridge. And then if I need something a little more substantial, I might throw in whatever vegetables I happen to have on hand, whether it be different greens or just chopped veggies, or if I have some animal protein, I might throw some in just to make it a little bit more bulky. Granola, mini frittatas, if eggs are doable. I mentioned the shiitake mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different, pretty simple, I mean, and even just fresh raw vegetables for me are great, especially now that it's so hot outside. All I want to eat is fresh fruit and fresh vegetables.
And as far as the fruit stripper, I guess you called it, that you put in the temp, is it just so you would just take, is there a certain fruit you like a strawberry, and you whip it and then you add anything to it, or you just...
Yeah, so I usually, whatever happens to be in season at the market, and then I puree it, and occasionally I'll cook it down, kind of depending on how it's looking, if it needs to be thickened a little bit. And then I sometimes will add different spices as well. Like you could, puree pear with cardamom, like you mentioned cardamom earlier, that would be delicious. And then, or, add ginger juice to it, or again, you can just season it and play around with different flavors. Maybe just, apple cinnamon is always a happy standard, I would say. You make a very, very thin layer on a piece of parchment paper, either that or on the dehydrator sheet. And then it's either dehydrated or placed in the oven at usually, I think, about 200 degrees, very, very low temperature. And then it needs to be kind of checked on and rotated around because it's challenging to get the fruit leather to be super consistently even throughout. Mm-hmm. So, and then you can just kind of roll it, slice it, or for kids, I'll often use cookie cutters and cut it into different shapes for them for snacks.
And what about your bone broth? Do you have a recipe for that one?
I don't use a recipe for it, but so again, it's kind of just whatever I happen to have on hand. And I can't currently have onion or garlic. So I usually occasionally will roast the marrow bones. And then I use a combination. It depends, but sometimes I'll use fennel. Sometimes I'll throw in cilantro and lemongrass and ginger and more kind of Asian inspired flavors. Other times I'll use, maybe fennel and parsley stems and carrots and celery. So it kind of just depends on what I have in my fridge.
And what about the animal bone? Do you have ones that you use specifically, or which ones do you?
For me, I currently, because on the specific diet that I happen to be on, I have to either use chicken bone backs or marrow bones. But you can really use whatever your preference is if you don't have.
And how long do you cook? You cook it for 24 hours, or how long do you cook it for?
I mean, that would be ideal, but it's hard to. I live in a home by myself, and I don't like to keep things on the oven if I'm gone. So it kind of just depends on what my schedule looks like. I mean, it's impossible for me to do 24 hours on the stovetop. So I usually just cook it for a few hours. And I don't know if you heard, but I usually add a little, like about a teaspoon or so of apple cider vinegar.
Oh, yeah.
To pull out the nutrients.
Nice. And then what about any desserts we've talked about a bunch of desserts here, but anything that you enjoy that's gluten-free, vegan, and nut-free? There's one.
I mean, I think exactly, an apple. The pureed coconut is delicious. That fits into all of those boxes. Banana pureed or blended.
Oh yeah, or banana ice cream. Yeah.
Exactly. Frozen banana blended, made into kind of an ice cream consistency, I think is super refreshing. And then I currently am just my 24-hour yogurt has become my mostly my dessert, because again, I don't have that much variety in my diet at the moment. So that to me is extremely satisfying. And I'll often add toasted coconut on top with some form of nut butter or seed butter, and then a whole bunch of different berries, sometimes hemp seeds or other seeds. And I'll mix in some ground cinnamon or ground ginger just to give it a little bit more flavor. And I find that to be
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just find that to be super satisfying for my restricted diet currently.
So you're doing the SIBO diet. And so
Essentially.
yeah. And what are some of your go-to recipes for that one? Because many people that we work with have SIBO as well.
So I'm not a huge animal protein eater, but I have to be currently. So that's been a bit of a shift for me. So, I mean, I eat a lot of the broths and I'll turn that into soup as well. I eat a ton of soup. And I've been making a fair amount of chicken salad actually. With like when pomegranate was in season, I would throw pomegranate in with different curry spices and different herbs. And that was really satisfying. I've been making a butternut squash hash with turkey bacon and roasted radishes and a bunch of different herbs, mixing that together and then maybe eating that with eggs. Pesto again, but just plain kind of puree with herbs and sometimes seeds and nuts, but sometimes I'll just, use oil and different herbs to just have some variety of flavor. And fish cakes occasionally. I make different like taco meat, and then I can do lettuce wraps or something along those lines. Burgers with all kinds of veggie combos, steamed greens with different spices, and meatballs. I mean, it's fairly meat heavy. I eat a ton of vegetables, but I have to eat a fair amount of meat. So, or even just, grilled fish or broiled fish. But I tend to love, and I think it'll shift a little bit now that it's so hot, but soups are kind of, I find to be super satisfying.
You're doing cold
even
soups
for, for breakfast. And
oh, you're doing like a miso in the morning, or what are you doing?
Pureed vegetables, like whatever happens to be, puree carrots and fennel and maybe tomato with some spices. And then occasionally I'll crack an egg into the soup, or, throw in a handful of herbs, or I'll maybe throw in some shredded chicken, like I mentioned. So just to kind of have some variety.
That's wild. So make the soup and then just crack the egg in, and obviously then stir it up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just to give a little more protein and a little more bite. But I also just make a ton of, stews and just with whatever vegetables I happen to have on hand. So it's usually veggie heavy and then with some kind of meat added in.
Usually doing a hot soup even in the summer. Do you do cold ones?
I'll occasionally eat them cold. Yeah. I haven't been making really cold because I'm currently supposed to be eating mostly cooked foods.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't been making like cucumber soup or anything along those lines, or like more gazpacho type soups.
Yeah, and typically for fertility, I know in traditional Chinese medicine, they recommend warming foods to keep the uterus warm.
Right.
But it's difficult if it's 90 out.
But then they say sometimes that it's actually better for your system to have the warming foods, even if you are hot. It's supposed to help to regulate your system and cool you down. So,
what? And what about the autoimmune protocol? We talked about this in detail, exactly what the autoimmune protocol was in episode number 29. So definitely check that out. But what about that one as far as, because it can again be restrictive, where we were talking before. So it's no grains and no nuts, no seeds, nightshades, no eggs.
Right. So I would say, I mean, it's similar to the SIBO protocol, but the autoimmune protocol, there's no nightshades eaten. So no tomato, no eggplant, no potatoes. But I would say, and as far as no rice goes, one thing you can do is use, which it's become pretty popular, I find these days with so many people on the autoimmune protocol, but using cauliflower as a replacement is a great alternative.
Yeah, I think it tastes good.
It's yummy. And if you can eat onion, I mean, I'm not eating onions currently, but for people that can eat onion, I like to saute down or even caramelize onion just to give it a little bit more depth of flavor to mix in with the cauliflower. And then you can always throw in some, ground cumin or coriander or other spices, or mix in some herbs again, just to give it a little bit more oomph. So it's not just plain cauliflower with salt. I think that definitely helps to just make it a little bit more interesting. And let's see. I'm trying to think what else with autoimmune.
Yeah, it's also basically it's like the paleo too, or like so you're gluten-free, dairy-free. So it is quite restrictive, right? So I guess are you more animal proteins you're seeing, or?
Yeah, I think it would be really challenging to remove animal protein from an autoimmune. I'm not sure. I would imagine some people do it, but I don't know the best way to really go about doing that. But I would say, again, just play with with any restricted diet, my advice is always to focus on what you can have and not what you can't have, because you'll make yourself crazy. And you'll start to to find so many different uses for things if you just really focus on what makes you feel good. And also just think about your food as nourishment. And if you're going to feel physically and even emotionally better, then it just makes it a lot easier, I think. But then I also, in my mind, and I don't know if this is maybe the best advice, but I tend to think, everything in moderation. And if you feel like, if you're just starting out and it's making you crazy and you're craving something and like you feel like your body really needs it, I mean, oftentimes it's because those are the things that you're not necessarily supposed to be eating. But exactly. But if you find yourself some alternative to it, and that might not be exactly in the strict protocol that you're supposed to be following, but there's something that'll make you emotionally feel better. If you have a little taste of it, it'll help you a little bit and you don't feel deprived, then in my mind, it makes sense to just maybe cave in every now and again and don't go crazy and don't binge on things that are not good for your system. But if you're really, really struggling, I tend to think that it might even help you in a way to just, like not be so hard on yourself, because it can be really, really challenging when you're starting a new diet.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's the stress of trying to figure the whole thing out.
The stress causes so much. It can just add so much to what it is that you're dealing with. So
yeah, I know when I was first trying to transition away from processed sugar, I did a lot of, because I still have a sweet tooth, but I did a lot of those banana ice cream. I did avocado, like mousse. I was always trying to find some dessert. I think the one you made of was a mango sorbet or a mango ice cream in there. It's just mangoes, and I think it's got cardamom in it and some maple syrup. Like, just, I always had to have some little something like that. So that was
your kind of cheat almost.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. It was my treat. Okay, I'm coming up for my banana ice cream. And I remember, a couple summers ago where I was just like downing all freezing the bananas and whipping it up in the blender, and then cinnamon and coconut and all that stuff. Yeah. So, and as far as your favorite dish that all your clients love, do you have
Gosh,
one?
my clients have such a variety of different health issues. They kind of run the spectrum. So there aren't really that many dishes that cross between client to client, I would say. But one, I often will, I guess, make a variation for different clients of a coconut flour tortilla taco. And then whether if like I have one family that has one vegetarian, but then the one person or two of the people in the family have a lot of digestive trouble, so they can't eat legumes, but the father, he does eat beans. So I'll make a marinated chicken, shredded chicken, and then also make a cumin scented black bean, a slaw that I usually put fruit into depending on what seasonal. So I love cara oranges are my absolute favorite, I would say, fruit. They taste like candy to me. And so when they're in season, I'll add that with jicama to the slaw. Sometimes will use mango, sometimes pineapple. And then I usually make a cilantro cream oftentimes out of cashews, if nuts are okay for the client. And so that's kind of like a sour cream substitute. And then different salsa or like an avocado mash, and often even roasted. I think I've done roasted carrots before as like little carrot chip crumbles for them to throw on top to give a little crunch. But it kind of varies from family to family. But I find that everyone loves tacos.
Yeah.
Especially when they have restrictions and can't necessarily eat the corn tortillas. So.
Yeah, I don't do corn. So the coconut flour one, how do you make that one then?
It's coconut flour, and you can use either arrowroot or tapioca starch, sea salt. And then again, it depends, because sometimes gums are problematic for some people, but you can use xanthan gum in it. But then there are also a bunch of, I actually have it made out of the yucca root, but there's a similar way for autoimmune protocol that you can make tortillas with yucca root.
And you just mix that with a bit of, obviously, because I think you have
it's mostly water and salt. Yeah. And I think there are even plantain tortillas as well, that you can basically puree plantains with sea salt and water and then make a dough out of that.
So what's the ratio? 3 to 1?
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
I think, because we made some crepes. I had, those crepes were insane in the Fab Fertile cookbook. Definitely check those out, where, I had a whole crepe it was like a sweet crepe and then like a sweet and a savory crepe that you made. And yeah, I remember sitting on the deck because it was in the summertime. I was making it going, oh my God, I've discovered heaven. It was so good.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's nice about those is you can throw berries on top with like, again, the coconut cream or like nut butter or, whatever it may be that's sweet and more sweet spices, or you can take it savory and make it into a taco or with vegetables. And so there's a lot you can do with that. And it kind of satisfies that starchy, carby, bready
Yeah.
need that we often feel, or at least I do.
Yeah, I'm with you. And do you have any success story you'd like to share? Anything with, I guess, people eating your awesome food and feeling better?
I mean, I would say for me, what feels like the biggest success is so I actually work for a nonprofit in the summers, and I cook they're essentially adventure retreats for young adults that either have cancer or have had cancer. And so they're out learning to whitewater kayak and rock climb and surf, and I'm in the kitchen cooking for them, and I absolutely love it. But I would say what feels like the most success to me is when I have participants from my programs later on, request recipes and tell me that they've been inspired to cook more back at home and make healthier food choices. And when they're excited to use different recipes that we had on the programs back at home with their families, and for Thanksgiving they're using recipes. And I love because I've had clients that have lost significant weight, maybe decreased their digestive troubles and things that are super helpful for them. But I really ultimately want them to feel empowered and to feel comfortable asking questions and to get in the kitchen and to really just feel comfortable giving their bodies what they feel they need. Because we hear there are just all these messages around telling us that we need to eat a certain way, or we need to do this a certain way or that a certain way. And we all need very, very different foods to nourish ourselves. We're all dealing with different obstacles. And so just to really feel comfortable with getting in the kitchen and feeling more comfortable at the grocery store, feeling more comfortable at the farmer's market. And that's what feels like the biggest, I would say, success for me.
Yeah, I love it. It's really inspiring people to do more home cooking, and that you can eat such amazing food. And for years I grew up kind of vegetarian. I ate pretty decent, and then left the house and I went to the standard Western diet, and it was a plate full of brown food. And I kept always wanting to go to vegan places for some, not that I'm a vegan, but I wanted to because they had really cool, just food that somehow nourished me. And I just felt good when I had it. And instead of having all that fried junk or processed Wendy's, whatever I was eating. Yeah. And so to be able to, I think, that's why I wanted to do the podcast, to really inspire people to know that they can eat awesome food and can really make you feel awesome, like that you made for your family on July 4th. My goodness, that sounded insane.
Yeah, it was fun. It's nice to be able to accommodate everyone too, because we also, we have a vegan in the family, and then we have people that eat kind of pretty standard American diet, and then I have a gazillion restrictions, and then we have someone with celiac, and so it's kind of catering to everyone's needs, but making everyone happy it can be challenging, but it also, I think it's more fun to just make it a big experiment, and it just, get everyone involved.
Yeah, play with it.
Mm-hmm.
So where can people find you if they're in the San Francisco area there? You do clients, you want to share kind of what your meal services are like? And
so I currently cook for private clients in the Bay Area. So I work with clients that have different health issues and dietary restrictions, whether it be me cooking weekly meals for them or doing grocery store tours, and then little one-on-one workshops where I'll write recipes specific to their health needs, and then we'll go back to their homes and cook a few recipes together. My website is my name. It's www.juliadeppe.com. My Instagram account is @jdeppe. So that's where more of my information is.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely Julia, DEPPE, and her Instagram account is JDEPPE. Definitely check it out. This was a super fun conversation. I could go on all day long because I just love this topic, and you just make it sound so good, all these different foods, and I'm now hungry. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was truly a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Hey there, Sarah Clark here. So are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, please know that my heart goes out to you. I support couples worldwide who are struggling with infertility to conceive and have healthy babies. Women like Rita, who gave birth to her beautiful daughter after following my fertility coaching system. Or Danielle, who after 2 failed IUIs was able to get pregnant after a supercharge her fertility discovery call with me. So here's how you get my help for free. So I offer a free Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call, and on that call, I'll create a plan with you that is going to help you fast track your success. So this call is not for everyone, and I'm really picky about who I get to speak with. And I have a strict but totally reasonable criteria that needs to be met in order for us to move forward. So here's who I can help. So first of all, you need to be able to explore your infertility diagnosis in a new light. So this offers for people who are open-minded, they're coachable, and if you can do that and want to double or triple your chances at the fertility clinic or get pregnant, awesome. So let's get on the phone and chat. Also, you must be an action taker. So someone who's committed to seeing results, you're able to follow directions. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything bizarre. But if you're one of those people who like to consume a ton of information, but don't like to spend time implementing and seeing results, then the call's not really for you. So I only want to spend time with people who are genuinely committed to their own success. So just click on the link in the show notes and apply, or go to fabfertile.com and click on the free consult. So it's a really short application that just tells you about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. So seriously, this is going to be the best time you've ever spent on your fertility. Looking forward to chatting. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you are a U.S. resident, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345345. You'll be prompted to enter your email address, and you will receive our 3-day free fertility diet challenge. The challenge includes delicious chef-prepared recipes that are specifically designed to enhance your fertility. Download the recipes and try them this weekend. For U.S. residents, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345345. For non-U.S. residents, go to www.fertilitydietfreebie.com to access your special gift. That is Fertility Diet Freebie, FERTILITY, Diet, DIET, freebie, FREEBIE.com to access the 3-day free fertility diet challenge. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman. He's the medical director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and the chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. What you find at the end of your fork is more powerful than anything you'll find at the bottom of a pill bottle. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.